Gareth Southgate has resigned from England. And for me, I'm seeing a lot of people say, yeah, perfect timing, very good timing. Thank you, Gareth. And by the way, it is a thank you, Gareth, if you're an England fan, because let's not get it twisted. We're going to talk about his legacy as England manager and how good he really was and how much he really did succeed. But one thing is for certain, whether you like Gareth Southgate or not, and there's a lot of people that are on the other bracket, one thing you cannot do is just discount everything he did. Because I remember England before Gareth Southgate. I remember them under Roy Hodgson. I remember them under Fabio Capello. I remember them under Steve McLaren. Obviously, Sven was kind of before my time. But I remember them under those managers. And I remember still teams that maybe they were coming towards the end of their cycles, but teams with a lot of hype. I'm talking the team of Gerrard, Lampard, Rooney in 2010. I'm talking 2012. I'm talking 2014. 2008 didn't even qualify for the tournament. 2014, they didn't get out the group. 2016, they lost to Iceland. So let's not get it twisted. England, before Gareth Southgate took over, were an absolute laughing stock amongst the so-called big nations, the so-called elite footballing nations. They were the laughing stock of all of them. And one thing Gareth Southgate, in my opinion, has done is bring some respect back to the program. Bring some respect back to English football at an international level. England are now seen as one of the teams that are massive threats at every single tournament that they play at. And I'm not going to say that's all Gareth Southgate's doing, because one thing that I don't like that people do is that people look at, look at what England were before and after. Like, you have to still apply some context. Yes, Southgate deserves credit for that. But also, one thing about international management, Gareth Southgate is not the one signing players for his national team. He's not in charge. He doesn't control what kind of talent is produced and kind of finds its way to the England setup. So it's not like Klopp, for example, where we say, oh yeah, you got to give a lot of credit to Klopp at Liverpool, because look at where Liverpool were before him and after him. Because Klopp had to go rebuild the squad. Gareth Southgate is not in charge of rebuilding the England squad. Let's be real. Like, he selects them, but the selection available to him, he has no control over. So I'm not going to give Gareth Southgate credit because in the last 6, 7, 8 years, Trent has become available, or Trent has become one of the best right backs in the world. Foden has become one of the best players in his position in the world. Saka has emerged as one of the best right wingers in the world. Declan Rice has emerged as one of the best defensive midfielders in the world. Jude has emerged into a superstar. That's not Gareth Southgate's doing. I don't want to say it, but I'm going to, because it's actually kind of true. He is fortunate that since he's come in, those kinds of players have become available to him. He doesn't deserve credit for Jude Bellingham and Declan Rice and Bukayo Saka being English and being produced in the last 10 years, because he's not the one that produced them. Let's be real here. But I have to give him credit, because he's made England serious at these tournaments, or at least more serious than they were. For me, I think I look around at people around me, my friends, co-workers. They are proud to support England at international tournaments again. They have belief watching their national team again. They have fun watching their national team again. He's given them some huge moments that, although he hasn't won, and ultimately that's the ultimate goal of sport, he has brought them to heights that most people in this country have never experienced in their lifetime. That's the reality. So in that sense, Gareth Southgate deserves credit. But this is 1000% the right decision, and I don't agree with a lot of people saying it's the right timing. I think the right timing was 2 years ago, bro. I'll be real. I think the right timing was after the Qatar World Cup. And people will say, look, it's not his fault that they lost to France. He can't control Harry Kane missing a penalty. I get that. But guys, let's be real. Some people would argue that we needed to see Southgate underachieve or whatever, and then, okay, you can replace him. But I think it's been very clear now for several tournaments that Gareth Southgate gives this team a very frustrating ceiling. I'm not going to let all these players get off scot-free. A lot of them did not perform, and you have to look at them, because I always say, I agree with Jamie Carragher, who said that international football is more about the players than it is the manager. I agree with him. But also, it has been very evident, in my opinion, for years now, that England's ceiling and how they want to play and what they want to achieve, it has a very, very recognizable ceiling with Gareth Southgate as your manager. Both in terms of his in-game substitution, both in terms of his philosophy as a manager, in terms of how he wants his teams to play, in terms of how he adapts to certain situations during a 90-minute game, his team selection, his identity, his IQ, or his identity, for picking the right profiles and putting the right profiles in the right positions, setting up a midfield. Those are all massive question marks, in my opinion, about Gareth Southgate as a manager. And I do believe that even though they made it to 2 finals, which, again, big ups to him, they've held England back. And one thing I'm never going to let him get away with, and I don't care how many people tell me, oh, you can only play who's in front of you. England have been lucky at several tournaments now to be given the easier side of the bracket. And people will say, oh, that's what happens when you win your group. First of all, 2018, England did not win their group. England didn't win their group. They came second. And while Belgium were sent over to the side with Brazil and France. England were put onto the side where their route to the final was Colombia on penalties, Sweden, and Croatia. And they lost to Croatia. So they were gifted that run in 2018. They weren't gifted it because they won the group. They were gifted it because of pure luck. Let's be very real with that. Secondly, the last Euro, you look at the run that they kind of had. They avoided all the big teams basically. The biggest team they played en route to a final was a Germany team that either side of that tournament finished outside of qualification in their groups for the World Cup. They didn't qualify out of their group at the World Cup. That was a Germany team that, if we're being absolutely honest here, was in transition. Joachim Löw was coming to the end of his tenure as Germany manager. They were looking for a young generation to kind of get them started again. You were still looking at an old, finished Germany team. Outside of them, okay, they beat Germany, then they beat Ukraine, then they beat Denmark, and then they lost to Italy, who didn't qualify for tournaments either side of that tournament at home. They played all but one game at home that Euro. And then you look at this tournament, right? You look at this tournament. The route that they were given, and again, people will say they won their group, so you're given an easier run when that happens. Not necessarily. First of all, England finished first in the worst group in Euro history. And that's not me. That's not hyperbole here. That's not me exaggerating. It was statistically the worst group ever in Euro history. No team outside of England won a single game. Denmark finished on 3 draws. Slovenia finished, I believe, on 3 draws as well. Serbia didn't win a game, and England won 1 game. It was the worst group statistically in Euro history. They finished first in that group. And they ended up being on the side of the bracket where Spain weren't playing, Germany weren't playing, France weren't playing, Portugal weren't playing. None of those teams were playing. Their route to the final, again, the minute it got kind of painted out, everybody looked at it and said, wow, Southgate's done it again. That route to the final is as easy as it can get. What were we looking at, chat? We were looking at Slovakia, who they barely beat. They then played the winners of Switzerland and Italy, which ended up being Switzerland. And then they ended up playing, out of that group, the winner of Netherlands, Austria, Turkey, and Romania, which ended up being the Netherlands, who have been, let's be real, also very fortunate to get as far as they did. All the good teams were on the other side of the bracket, chat. England's path to the final from the minute the brackets were decided was very straightforward. They made it to the final, and just like I predicted from the start, and just like happens at every single tournament, under Gareth Southgate, the minute that they come up against equal or superior level talent, Gareth Southgate's coaching is not enough to either close the gap or put England above their opposition. It's never the case. And it was easy to kind of like give him a pass when you were looking at teams that had Maguire. No disrespect to Maguire, by the way. For me, very underrated at international level. But hear me out here. Ashley Young at left wing back, Lingard, Dele Alli, Henderson, Eric Dyer, Trippier. When those players were the core of your England team, and you were relying on Kane and Sterling basically to bail you out, there's no problem there. But when you look at the quality that England possess, and this is not me giving them a pass because a lot of them have honestly had disgraceful tournaments for the talent that they possess. But again, when you look at the talent individually that England have at their disposal, Gareth Southgate has not done enough with the tools at hand. He hasn't maximized the talent that he has. Nowhere near. No one can convince me otherwise. So, look, big up to Gareth Southgate. I think he's probably done more right than he has done wrong. Oh, he's definitely done so. And he is probably their most successful manager since Sir Alf Ramsey, who obviously won the World Cup in '66. But I don't know if that's as much an indictment on Gareth Southgate as it is the fact that Roy Hodgson was a failure, Fabio Capello was a failure, Sven-Goran Eriksson underachieved, Vernabel was underachieved, Glenn Hoddle underachieved. All these guys are massive underachievers. England are the biggest underachievers of all time. So being better than dog shit, no disrespect, isn't for me cause for celebration. It's a pat on the back. It's a well done. You did what I expected anyways. But all this talk now about knighthood and talking about greatest manager in England's history, for me, that's all going too far in my opinion, man. Honestly, I wish him well. Like I said previously, I think he's a great man. I think he's a great role model. I think he's a great ambassador for the England national team, for the FA. I think he carries himself with absolute class. From what I've heard, great man manager. The players all love him. Nothing against Gareth Southgate as a man. But as a manager, I personally think, right, I'm seeing a lot of people say this: be careful what you wish for. I'm seeing a lot of people say, be careful what you wish for with Southgate. Who's to say that Graham Potter or Eddie Howe or what's his name, Lee Carsley, or any of these guys will do as well as Southgate does? Let me tell you this, right? I'm gonna put my reputation on the line here. I'm not sure any of them will do as badly as Southgate does. Or I don't, excuse me, let me say that again. I'm not sure that any of them will do as well as Southgate did. I'm not sure. I can't guarantee that. It's not 100% positive. We thought that Ten Hag and Ranić would come in for Ollie, and that's not how football works. But what I will tell you is that I'm confident as an outsider, of no bias towards or against England. Under Gareth Southgate, for me, England were never, ever, 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 ever going to win any serious competition, ever. Because you've seen now so many times The proof is in the pudding, guys. Honestly, the sample size is too much now. The minute Southgate comes up against a better coach or a better team or an equal level team, he reverts the type. He reverts the cowardly football. He reverts the pragmatic football. And truthfully, his team is basically drowned under the cosh. That's the way I see it. So in my opinion, as long as Gareth Southgate was there, you had a high ceiling, but that ceiling was never going to be broken. At least with these other candidates that we're hearing about, you have the potential to break that ceiling. And as an England fan, that should excite you. I know England fans right now are comfortable and they're happy with like how far they've came, but the job's not done yet. You haven't achieved shit. You made it to the final, but no one remembers the losers, guys. Outside of England, no one will ever remember England's Euro finals in 30 years. I promise you that. Do you guys remember who made the final in the Euro 1976? Do you guys remember who made the final in 92? Maybe my historians do, but most people don't. That's football, man. So England have done brilliantly to get where they are, but the job's not finished. And I think England fans should be excited. Thankful for Gareth Southgate, no doubt, but excited that a new man can come in, maybe a bit more tactically flexible, a bit more tactically adept, a bit more wise around the ears when it comes to in-game substitutions and in-game management and correctly profiling players like Trent, who has been massively underutilized by Gareth Southgate in the last few years. There's so many, right? I would be excited if I was an England fan looking at the potential of Eddie Howe, the potential of Lee Carsley, whose under 21 team plays brilliant football, potentially even a foreign manager, Mauricio Pochettino. These guys, for me, there's no guarantee that they get England back to finals or semifinals, but I think the possibility of actually winning major silverware at international level actually exists with them. With Gareth Southgate, great guy, did as well as he could. For me, he overachieved for his own managerial talents with England. He personally overachieved, not the group, him. But I think that ceiling was always going to be hit and it was never going to be broke. With these guys, I really think there's a chance. But chat, before we kind of change subjects, let's talk about the candidates, right? First of all, who do you guys want to see come in? Because me personally, right, I've been seeing the noise, I've been seeing at who people are talking about, and there's a few candidates for sure. But who's the best one? Who gives England the best chance of actually winning? And it is actually realistic. For me, Thomas Tuchel, that's unrealistic. I'll be real, chat. I don't see Thomas Tuchel taking the England job. I think he's waiting for club level football. I think Klopp, I can't see him taking the England job either, even though that would be a terrific appointment. I can't see him taking the England job either. I think, honestly, Klopp, these next 6 to 12 months is looking at whatever Xabi Alonso does. If Xabi Alonso doesn't take the Real Madrid job and takes Bayern, I think Klopp becomes a serious candidate for Real Madrid. I think if Alonso takes the Real job and not the Bayern job, maybe the Bayern job becomes a serious candidacy for Klopp. Maybe the German national team too. Obviously, Nagelsmann has that till 2026. But maybe Klopp decides to take a backseat until after the World Cup. You never know. And I just don't see Klopp taking over England. I don't know. Like, for me, I'd be surprised if he did so. Pep's another one. Obviously, Pep has always talked about wanting to coach an international team. I think it's always been more so Brazil than England, though. But I think Pep, to be honest with you, if he was available right now, I actually think they could get Pep. But I think the fact that he's still deciding his City future, England need a manager now. They can't afford to wait for a year. For me, there's three main candidates, I think. I think there's three main ones. There's Eddie Howe, there's Graham Potter, and there's Lee Carsley. Those are the three for me that are actual serious candidates. Sean Dyche, I think that's being optimistic. I think Gary O'Neill, that's not going to happen. I think those are the big three in my opinion. But let me say this though, right, chat? I do think I'm seeing Carragher talk a lot about, and I think it's because he's kind of upset about the slander Gareth Southgate is getting, and he's kind of saying, be careful what you wish for. England can't just hire anybody. But I think people are starting to underplay the England managerial role, as if like no one wants it. Like I saw, who was it today? Lawrence McKenna, great guy, by the way. Lawrence is a good friend of mine. I think he was saying like, I think a lot of managers are going to be looking at the job Gareth Southgate did and how much criticism he got, and they might want to stay away from that. And while I hear his logic, I don't agree. England's managerial role right now, in my opinion, is probably one of the most attractive jobs in international football right now. Maybe even in football in total. Think about this, chap. Gareth Southgate was the highest paid manager at the Euros this year. I think he was getting paid $5 million a year. Who's the highest paid international manager, period? It might be Mancini with the Saudis, right? In 2022, I don't know if this has changed much, but sorry, at the FIFA World Cup in 2022, I don't know if this has changed. But 2 years ago, Gareth Southgate was the second highest paid manager in the World Cup. The only one that got paid more was Hansi Flick. He gets paid $5 million a year. That's not bad for a guy or for a role that you basically work, 5 to 6 times a year? You don't see these guys every single tournament. You don't see these guys every single week. You see them on international break or at tournaments. So you see them 5 times a year maybe. You get paid $5 million a year. During your free time, you're living in the UK, which, let's face it, it's not the greatest place to live in, but if you're living in London, getting paid that kind of money, hey, you're living good. Let me tell you that for free right now. If you make $5 million a year and you're living in London, you're living like a king. So you're living in London. You basically get to just watch football all year long as not a neutral, not a casual, but like you're observing, scouting if you want to call it that, but you're just watching football whenever you want. Okay, I want to watch John Stones for City. Let me go get VIP treatment at the Etihad and just watch football. That's what you're doing every single week until international break. You're chilling. And then you're also being able to coach the highest talented, the highest quality players in the world. I'm sorry, whether you like these guys or not, whether you rate these guys or not, just try and think of this from any manager's point of view. Take yourself out of your bias situations now. Try and think of this as a manager. You're being offered $5 million a year. You work 5 times a year. You live in London. You live like a king. And when you do have to work, these are the players at your disposal. Jude Bellingham. I'm sorry, chat. Whether you like him or not, every single manager would look at Jude Bellingham and say, yeah, that's a player I'd like to coach. Bukayo Saka. Yeah, that's a player I'd love to coach. Declan Rice. I'd love to coach Declan Rice. Harry Kane. We had a poor tournament. For me, he's on the decline, but he's still a name that's respected in the game. Phil Foden. Kobbie Mainoo. Adam Wharton. These are players. I'm not even getting to the defense yet. Trent Alexander-Arnold. I'm sorry. For me, this is why it's so crazy the way he's been treated by Southgate. Because any national team or any manager worth their salt looks at Trent Alexander-Arnold and starts licking their lips. As in, wow, this is a generational talent at that position. I can't even imagine the kind of solutions to games and the kind of way my team can play if you give me my hands on Trent Alexander-Arnold. These are the kinds of quality of players, whether you rate them or not, Chet. I'm sorry, they're highly respected names in the game. And most managers are biting your hand off to go coach them. So most managers are taking this job if it's available. $5 million a year, you work 5 times a week, you get to coach the best players in the world, you live in London, you live like a king, you watch Premier League games all year long. That's the dream job, bro. That's the way I look at it. Who is the best candidate, though? I'll be real. I'm looking at those 3 again, because I think those are the most realistic ones at this current moment, unless they want to wait a few months. Who knows? To be fair, England have time to kind of bite on this decision. There's not a major tournament until 2026. There's not going to be another international break for a few months. This is happening at the perfect time for them, really. Let's look at all 3 candidates. Graham Potter is the one that is like the most, because he hasn't coached for a while now. He hasn't been coached since he got sacked by Chelsea. And he's been turning down a lot of jobs. Turned down the Ajax job, turned down the Leicester job, was reportedly in talks of returning to Brighton. I don't know if he turned down that job or if it just broke down. But he's had opportunities to work since he got sacked by Chelsea. And it makes me think, is there a job in kind of like his foresight that he's been waiting for? Or a job that maybe he's even been told by certain people, maybe the FA, wait around. Don't take a job now, because if this happens, you're the first person we're calling. And if that's the case, Graham Potter as England manager. Tactically, there's no question about it. He's a terrific, very brilliant mind, in my opinion. But I think that Chelsea spell really opened up a lot of questions. Does he have the personality? Does he have the aura, the swagger to really command a room full of superstars? What he did at Swansea and Brighton, for me, is absolutely brilliant. Honestly, the football that he got, that level, that quality of team performing at, the way they were playing was absolutely exquisite. But going to Chelsea or going to a Man United, I always say it, right? It's not enough to be just a good football manager. It's not enough to be just good tactically. You have to have the authority and the respect of your peers and the respect of your players and the character and the personality to really command not just the dressing room, not just the team, but the club as a whole. And I do think that was something that Graham Potter, and he was unfortunate, right? Because Chelsea at the time were going through a new takeover. It was a club in turmoil, in my opinion. The dressing room was huge. You had a squad of over 30. It was a very tough job, in my opinion, for anybody. So I'm not going to blame it completely on him. But you did get the impression at Chelsea that the job was a little too big for him. The way he was even handling the media, the way reportedly players were not falling out with him, but almost like looking at this guy saying, really? Is this it? I think it was a massive wake-up call and maybe like a move that was probably a little too early in his career, or probably not the right move to make at that point in his career. England. I don't know if England is the right job for him. I can't lie, chat, for 2 reasons. A, the personalities and the egos and the names in that dressing room. Is that the next great job for Gareth Southgate? I'm not 100% sure. And then also, I think Gareth Southgate, if we're being honest, is a manager that at most of his jobs, he needs time to kind of get his ideas across. It's not an overnight thing with Gareth Southgate. Not Gareth Southgate. It's not an overnight thing with Graham Potter. Yeah, Graham Potter, I think, Chad, it's fair to say, right? He's not a manager that overnight you're going to get your ideas across. Once he does, you're left with a very, very good product, a very, very good result. But at international level, I don't know if you have that kind of time, especially because you see these players, once every 2-3 months? You're not going to have the time on the training ground to really get that high level of idea and that high level of like footballing philosophy applied to your players in time, in my opinion? That's a major question mark I have with Graham Potter. So I do think his next job should probably be club. I do think it should be a club job. Next up for me is Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe, I'll be very honest with you, chat. I'll cut all the nonsense. I won't even speak too much on it. He is my favorite, in my opinion. I've been saying this for a long time. I think Eddie Howe would make a very good England coach. I think Eddie Howe is very, very good at speaking with players, at handling egos, at handling dressing rooms. The human side of the game, he has it very, very down. And that's not to say Graham Potter doesn't. Graham Potter, I think, has a degree in that kind of shit, in human psychology. But Eddie Howe is also, as far as I know, and as far as I've seen throughout his career, very, very, very good communicator, very, very good human to human. He understands the human side of the game. I actually think as well, too, that his style of football would suit international football very, very well. He's able to be pragmatic. He's able to play attacking football. He sets his defense up quite well. His sides play very exciting football at times. At times, Bournemouth, for me, were like the darlings of the Premier League, right? Everyone wanted to see Bournemouth play because, okay, they got some beatings once in a while, but they were very, very fun to play. And then when he got sacked by Bournemouth, he actually took a year off of football, or a year off of coaching, to go relearn the game. In fact, he actually went to Atletico Madrid to learn the more defensive style of the game from Diego Simeone. So this is a very flexible manager. He's a manager capable of playing the attacking side of the game, capable of being a bit more pragmatic. I think it will be very, very good for that dressing room. Able to handle big names, in my opinion. I think Eddie Howe is the safest pick, and I actually think he'd be very successful as England manager. He is a better coach than Gareth Southgate. That's flat out, no question about it. For me, he is an upgrade on Gareth Southgate. But there's a third candidate, right, that isn't safe, I would say. He's a bit unknown, but damn, the potential for me is sky high. That's Lee Carsley. By the way, I knew I remembered Lee Carsley's name, bro, honestly. Like, I was trying to think, where do I remember this guy from? He was at Everton, and then he was at Birmingham later. And it's so funny, actually, because as a player, guys, Lee Carsley, I watched this guy, right? Towards the end of his career, to be fair. But he was like this no-nonsense workhorse in midfield. And now you look at the way his teams play, it's like fluid, intricate, off-the-ball movement, modern-day football to the T. It's very, very nice to watch.
There's a different composure on the ball.
Look at the way he's playing. So just for some context, right, chat, we'll go back. His team plays as a 4-4-2, or at least that's how they played at the last Euros, but they don't play with any out-and-out striker. In fact, it's very fascinating with the way they play. In their double pivot, they have Angel Gomez, if you guys remember him from United. Little kid playing in holding midfield. You have Curtis Jones next to him. I think he was playing Madueke a lot on the right just to provide that width and that like stretching out defenses. You had Emil Smith-Rowe. You had Morgan Gibbs-White. And then who was the last one? There was another one as well too. There's no out-and-out striker if I remember correctly the way they play. But very, very fascinating watching them play.
With the position domination this team has, they can afford to play with this duo because they rarely lose the ball. That is how...
Thank you. I think what he just said there right now, chat, is like what we've all been screaming at Gareth Southgate for the last few years. You don't have to worry about off the ball. You don't have to worry about your shape when you lose the ball. You don't have to worry about are they good enough defensively? Are they strong enough? Are they big enough? And I get it. It's important to be a good athlete in today's game. But this whole talk the last 4 years, chat, about Trent Alexander-Arnold can't play for England because the fear is defensively he'll be caught out. When you have that exciting, that gifted of a weapon at right back on the ball, and he would make you that much better of a team in possession, the defensive side of the game becomes less of a worry because you're on the ball as much as you are. A guy like Kyle Walker has to defend as much as he does, chat, because he loses the ball all the time. But if you really predicate and prioritize good, technically secure, on the ball, in possession players around your team, you don't have to worry about, chat, oh, what do we do when we play up against an Mbappe? What do you have to do when you play up against the Leao? What do you do when, we lose the ball in midfield and we're lightweight in midfield? You don't have to worry about that, chat, because you're the protagonist in the game. You're the one that takes the game to the other team. The other team game plans for you because you all have all these dangerous weapons on the pitch. I love what he just said right there. Honestly, that's my biggest issue with Gareth Southgate at England. It's always about how can we game plan for the other team? How can we be counter-reactive to how the other team is playing? We have the best players in the world, but let's not assert our great talent on them. We'll adapt our talent to how they're playing. I love what he just said there. I know what a lot of you guys are going to say as well too. Very clear. I'm fully aware that what we just watched is very idealistic. It's very theoretical, and there's no guarantee that this style of football is translatable at England's senior level. I'm not trying to say that Lee Carsley is going to just go walk in on day one and get England playing like that. I'm very aware that it's all very circumstantial as well too. And you have to be pragmatic at times, especially at international football. But I think the main takeaway from that video, and the main takeaway in general, if you watch Lee Carsley's team last Euros, is that the way he wants his team to play is very, very clear. And I think that's been a big issue, especially at this tournament with Gareth Southgate. Yes, they made it to the final, but I've been on the record saying performance-wise, this was the worst tournament they played under him. Even in 2018, although the style wasn't beautiful to watch, it was very clear with the way they wanted to play. Remain defensively organized in your back five, win games off set pieces, be tough to break down. 2021, get Sterling on the ball, Kane be in the right position, Shaw overlapping, Trippier kind of underlap. Like, again, it wasn't pretty, but you knew how they wanted to play. This tournament, they've gone away from all of that, and honestly, Southgate had no idea how to utilize the players at his disposal. All the people getting at the players, yes, they didn't have great tournaments, but make no mistake about it, the players this tournament saved Southgate. Those moments saved Southgate because there was no clear, concise plan about the way they wanted to play in almost any game they played this tournament. So at least with what I'm seeing from Lee Carsley in that clip, you're at least seeing that it's very clear the way he wants to play. He wants to prioritize ball possession. He wants to prioritize technical security all throughout the pitch. He wants to prioritize off the ball movement. He wants his team to play that way. And I think just off the bat, that gives your team a better chance to win if it works out than the way Gareth Southgate wants to play. Against the best teams, that's the way that's going to be successful. If it's kind of like, if you kind of produce that kind of football at a successful level, that can beat the big teams. I'm not saying it's a guarantee that it does, but if you get it right, that can actually go toe-to-toe against the big teams. And then, and only then, will we see England seriously challenge for major international honors. Let's not forget Pochettino. I think Pochettino is actually a sleeper for this job as well, too. I think Pochettino, right? I'm not a huge fan of Pochettino. I've been very vocal about that throughout the years. As far back as when, like, he was rumored to take over from Oli, I was not on Pochettino whatsoever. But, and I see some people saying, I'm like, nah, not for me. International football is different than club football, bro. And I actually think Pochettino at international level would suit it down to the ground. I think he would suit it very, very well. Because again, you're not asked to be some tactical master. You're not asked to be tactically brilliant. You don't have to be a Pep. What you have to be is a very good communicator. What you have to be is very, very good on a human level with players. You have to be able to build a platform to allow your individuals to kind of do their thing and win you games. And I have to be honest, that's all stuff that I've never really criticized Pochettino for. I think Pochettino's football is actually at its best when it's like a good platform behind individuals just doing their thing. That's what it was at Spurs. Be defensively solid, play a fast kind of brand of football, and let your stars get to work. He wasn't a massively intricate tactical manager like that at Spurs. Let's be real. I think people have kind of like looked at his tenure that way, but not for me, chat. I can't lie. I think he'd be decent at England, to be honest with you. He speaks the language well, good communicator, gets along very, very well with his players. You look at the way when he was sacked at Chelsea, how his players all came out and like the letters and the Instagram posts and stuff like that. I get everybody says a goodbye to their coach when they leave, but the extent to which Chelsea's players kind of were upset at Pochettino's sacking, I think is damning. Again, I'm not a huge fan of him as a coach, but as a man manager, I think it's unquestionable that he's a very, very good man manager. And I'm sorry, you don't have to be Pep to be successful at international level. I think he'd be a sleeper pick for the England job. And I would back it. I would back Pochettino for the England job. That's all for me. Like I said, congratulations to Gareth Southgate for a very successful 6 years. I think it was a success overall. Couldn't get it past the hump. But for me, as an individual, I feel like he overachieved.